Well, you know, I hate to ask this question, but since Izzy's sitting over here with a big blue bag in his head, I guess I have to ask the question.
Well,
Izzy,
well, go ahead.
what do you got sitting there with a big blue bag over your head?
Well, it looks better than without the bag, but what I'm really doing is trying to learn how to take cover.
Cover?
Yep.
What's up?
Well, you just wait until we get to this stuff. We're going to talk about a really scary time in our history.
Really? Whoa.
That's right.
Even scarier than the time that you were,
When I first looked in the mirror?
Yeah. You said it, I didn't. You said it, I didn't.
Hello and welcome to your old news update. I'm incognito, Izzy Fitz.
And I'm the perplexed Bud Driscoll.
Yeah, well, you're just going to have patience.
I have patience here.
Let's shout out to our sponsors, Eagle Crest Retirement Community, 1501 East Magnolia, Headley's Clothing, 1829 South 9th.
Headley didn't make this.
No, he didn't. But he may have made the hat. And then the Smoky Hill Museum, 211 West Iron.
And a bunch of Halloween trees.
Yep. And as we top the headlines from yesteryear, we are going to harken back to the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962.
Remember those kids?
Yep. He called President John F. Kennedy called a series of crisis conferences at the White House on October 22nd, 1962, on the subject of highest national urgency. It's all about the Soviets putting those nuclear bombs, those missiles, in Cuba, on this side of the globe.
So you don't want to play with those kids.
Yep, and if you look on down the next day, Schilling Air Force Base was on alert status, but an Air Force spokesman could not link the alert to the president's action on Cuba. He says it was business as usual, but we know now that those guys were about ready to go to war, and they were scared. I talked to a few of them.
That's right.
Then we got another one here. The United States and the Soviet Communists approached an armed showdown on the high seas on October 24th. As Soviet cargo ships plowed toward Cuba, and American naval power converged on them. Yep. And then also on that day, congressional leaders were grimly accepting that the prospect that full-scale military action may be needed to back Kennedy's move aimed at wiping out the Cuban Missile threat to the Western Hemisphere.
Stay awake, kids. This is important.
That's right. And I want you to remember something, kids. This was real stuff. People were scared to death. October 26, 1962, we had a photo in the Salina Journal that showed third graders at Grace E. Stewart practicing duck and cover techniques designed to give them some protection in case of a bomb attack on Salina. Salina, because of Schilling Air Force Base, Salina was a target. And the system of kneeling down in the safest areas and shielding their faces would be used only if an attack came with little warning that children could not be sent home or sent to safer shelters. So, folks, you know that bad times happen all through our history.
If he hadn't wore that bag, Izzy might not be here.
That's right.
Well, let's go back to 1937. We'll just move on to something a little, well, this is about sterilization, so I guess it's...
This is a head shaker.
October 23rd, 1937. Catherine O'Loughlin McCarthy, former congresswoman, said today she was ready to offer documentary proof to support a requested investigation of wholesale sterilization of girls in the State Industrial School in Beloit without the consent of parents. Mrs. McCarthy urged a conference of Democratic women in Wichita to investigate conditions at the institution, asserting records showed 62 out of the 148 inmates had been sterilized when Governor Walter A. Huxman took office. She said operations had been scheduled for 22 more girls. And then later she continued her criticism of the girls' school in Beloit, saying records did not show the girls were imbeciles or had social disease. She challenged part of a statement by Will T. Beck, former member of a board of administration, who said most of those sterilized had been perverts, obstructress, fighters, or near degenerates.
Man, weird times there. Yep. October 27th, 1937. Pre-Halloween vandalism has begun. A little later than in some years, but no more welcome. Police said today. Mrs. J.A. Lockstrom called the offices at 8:30 this morning and told them of an incident which caused the issuance of a warning to pranksters from the office of Chief of Police D.K. Fitch. Oh, Fitch. At the Lockstrom home Tuesday evening, boys threw small rocks at the house, hit the glass panel in the front door, and broke it. Broke it.
Vandalism. And now as we promised you last week.
Right, an update.
An update.
We follow through.
October 22nd, 1912. And this is the shooting that we were talking about. The connection between the shooting of Mrs. W.R. Cox at 145 North 11th and the suicide of Mrs. Carl Ward of Baker and Walnut was cleared up to a certain extent today when it was learned through the statement of Mrs. Cox that she had been shot by Mrs. Ward a few minutes before the latter woman ran to her own home and took her own life.
Confusing, ain't it?
I know. Mrs. Ward was the guest of Mrs. Cox at dinner. But shortly after 2 o'clock, the neighbors heard a shot, but thought it was only the explosion of a motorcycle. Several persons also saw Mrs. Ward half running towards her home, where she proceeded to take her own life. It is said that Mrs. Cox...
Why would she do that?
I don't know. Maybe she was depressed, she shot someone.
I guess.
It is said that Mrs. Cox maintains that the shooting was accidental on the part of Mrs. Ward. She says she was examining the revolver and it went off before she knew it. Now, one of the features of the suicide of Mrs. Ward seems to have been her wonderful vitality and her determination to end her life against all odds. The fact that she fired 5 bullets into her breast just over her heart, and then had been able, after she had been disarmed, to have gotten up, gone out of the house, lifted off the cistern, and jumped in, seems wrong.
Mercy.
And for an accidental gun,
All that.
some people are just too high-strung.
An unfortunate thing happened. Read more about the way things used to be in the look back section of Monday's Salina Journal.
And you have a happy, safe Halloween, and we'll see you yesterday.
Take